Hey guys, hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone's staying safe and warm, especially if you're affected by the recent extreme weather events and cold that we've been having here in the States. Just sending out my best wishes that everyone's staying safe out there and healthy. I wanted to create this video just to kind of go over my initial predictions for the 2022 Senate map. It's difficult to really say anything too certain at this point in time, given the lack of reliable polling, um, and the lack of any polling, really, for the most part. We haven't really even seen any kind of generic popular vote type of metrics to derive a expected breakdown of how the Senate may end up looking on a national scale. So it is really tough to really predict anything for too certainly. But I do think that it is worthwhile at least setting in like a initial prediction for where we could be heading. My goal is to kind of in 2021 maybe do a video like this once every month just to kind of like gauge any kind of new changes. But I kind of wanted to start the conversation and kind of lay out where I see us kind of moving to in 2022. So obviously after the 2020 elections, we split the Senate 50-50, following the election of Senators Ossoff and Warnock in Georgia in the January special elections down there, giving us a split Senate at 50-50, but the majority to the Democrats, giving the tie-breaking vote of Kamala Harris. As you can see here, we have oops, my apologies. We have like a pretty interesting initial Senate map. We got obviously a decent number of safe states in play. It's a pretty, at least on face value, a relatively Democrat-friendly map, given the 20 seats that are up by the Republicans, including retiring incumbents in Alabama, North Carolina, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, with the latter three being potentially battleground races, which I would say like a particular emphasis on North Carolina and Pennsylvania. But I think that it's a interesting map because there's also potentially some opportunities for pickups by the Republicans as well. And just to kind of like start going through this map here, I want to just lay out what I see are some of the pretty safe or solid to safe states here. I would say a lot of it depends on what incumbents decide to do ultimately. But yeah, this is kind of as I see right now, the safe states, or I should say, using this map kind of color template, solid to safe map for Republicans at the moment. Again, it is tough to really say anything too definitively at this point, but this is kind of just me going through and, based on our, how 2020 looked, right? Like we can pretty safely say that, at least based on the presidential popular vote and the fact that many senators running for reelection in a lot of these Republican states and Democratic states, for that matter, tended to outperform Donald Trump on the ballot. I think it's pretty safe to say that we can see states like Idaho, Utah, re-electing or electing Republicans again. And then meanwhile, kind of on the flip side, I'll say that we can pretty safely say that states like California, are going to be solid, just to leave in like some possibility for error. Oregon and Washington, pretty solid Democratic states. One could make the argument that in the right, perfect environment, a Republican could win one of those states. But, as things stand right now, it is pretty unlikely. So I'm going to do the same here with Maryland, Connecticut, New York. Uh, all are going to be relatively safe states. And I'm given recent trends, I'm going to put Colorado as well as a, as a safe state. Maybe not solid blue, but, pretty safe. Bennett, I think, is most likely going to be running again, and he has, he was reelected with, I think, a plurality of the vote back in 2016. Didn't win a majority, but I think it's pretty safe to say that in a neutral political environment, a candidate like Bennett is going to win in a state like Colorado by a decent margin. So I'm going to mark that as blue. Now I want to kind of get into some of the leans. I am going to try to limit right now the the toss-ups. I'd like to kind of just say, kind of like stake where I see like the more likely path. Granted, a lot of these states I think should be rated as toss-ups, but I'm going to try to give it a definite tilt one way or another. So looking at some of the Republican leans and like leans, I would say, rather than tilts, I'm going to include Iowa here. Iowa and Ohio are now pretty Republican states, at least in the era of Donald Trump. It'll be interesting to see if these trends continue, but I do think that Chuck Grassley potentially retiring is a bit of a wild card here. But even if it's not Senator Grassley running for re-election, I do think that a Republican is going to have a pretty solid advantage, especially in a year where, generally speaking, in midterms, the the party out of power tends to have a little bit of better luck. As of right now, I'm going to also toss in Florida as a lean. Again, it's a relatively inelastic state, but Republicans have, at least in the Trump era, and before, as we all know, have generally seen a decent amount of success. In the 2018 midterms, a national environment, about 8 points in favor of the Democrats. You had Senator Scott carry the state by a slight margin. Again, Marco Rubio running for re-election in 2022. Heard today that Ivanka Trump is not planning on challenging him in his primary. So assuming it's Marco Rubio again, I would anticipate him winning re-election again down in Florida. But as far as the leans Republicans, I think this is it for my map. Now kind of going into the lean Democrats, I'm going to actually toss in Vermont as a lean. And normally I would say, obviously, given the massive margins that Trump won and, Sanders and Leahy have won in the past, 36 points by Biden in 30 or 35 points by Biden in 2020, you'd say, well, maybe like Vermont should be a solid blue state. But I do think there is a little bit of a wild card factor here due to Governor Phil Scott. There's some speculation he may run for Senate in 2022, and given his very, solid, electoral history, if we kind of jump in here again, I think that he's got a decent shot. Granted, a lot of New England states have been rather interesting with candidates like Governor Baker, Governor Scott, Governor Sununu drastically outperforming other Republicans in their states in their gubernatorial races. So maybe this won't hold in a general Senate election, but I do think that if someone like Phil Scott runs, he definitely turns this solid blue state to probably a lean blue state. And especially if Senator Leahy decides to end up retiring, I do think that this could be potentially a legitimate toss-up, or maybe if not a toss-up, a tilt Democratic state. Which also, since we're in the kind of the space of New England, I think that gives a good opportunity to talk a little bit about New Hampshire, my home state. So, as you can see, there's been a general, New Hampshire used to be one of those kind of Republican bastions in the 20th century. It's increasingly become a little bit more of a tilting blue state, you know, based on the national presidential vote. We'd say it leans about 3 points towards the Democrats in national elections. Senator Shaheen, also I think it was a little bit about poor candidacy by Corky Messner, but regardless, Shaheen was going to win this election, and she won it by a lot, 15.6 points. But now, you see with Governor Sununu here against Dan Feltes, Dan Feltes, he blew him out of the water. Outperformed Trump by about 39 points on his ballot. Tons of ticket splitting, like relatively strong Democratic areas like Manchester and Nashua, Concord. Even Portsmouth almost went to Sununu. So he is a really strong candidate, and if there's someone who can flip this to the Republicans, I think it's going to be him. That said, I'm going to mark New Hampshire right now as a tilt blue state, just because there's so much uncertainty. We don't even know if Governor Sununu is going to run against Maggie Hassan, and even if he does run, it's still going to be a very competitive election. Again, I think that New Hampshire in general has not been a terribly conducive environment for today's Republican Party, at least as it stands right now on February 18th, 2021, kind of the shadow of Trump at the moment. So, it'll be interesting to see how this all kind of falls out. When I look now at kind of the rest of the map, I think I'm going to put Nevada here as a, it's tough. I would say I'm going to kind of cop out and put Nevada and Arizona as both tilt blue states. Nevada and Arizona have trended towards the Democrats lately. For the most part, Nevada has, definitely a very interesting environment because it has, generally speaking, been voting for Democrats as of late. Both states, I think, given the right political conditions nationally, both, at least based on the presidential election results, they do still lean right of the nation. So again, they're going to have incumbents running most likely. However, given a neutral political environment, I still think that a Republican could win and potentially challenge the candidates, but it's got to be a strong candidate, someone like Sandoval in Nevada, or a McCain-esque type Republican that better fits the increasingly suburbanized, diverse demographically diverse landscape that Arizona increasingly exhibits. Same thing I would say with Georgia. I'm going to put it tilt blue. I still think that Georgia is a lean Republican state. However, now that you have Warnock up in 2022, he is a incumbent. He will be the advantage of incumbency has declined in recent years, but it's still strong. And I think that he probably is a slight favorite to win re-election, especially if a uncompetitive Republican statewide in the mold of Donald Trump is someone like Collins, for example, is nominated. I think that they would have a relatively tough time winning statewide. But then again, who knows? In a national, let's say, +2, +4 Republican environment, perhaps this shifts over to a tilt red state or even a lean red state. It's just tough to say at the moment, but for now I'll give it tilt. And same thing with Perdue and Loeffler potentially running again for that seat. I think that the advantage is going to be given to Warnock. So now we get to like the real battlegrounds, I would say, and this is where I think it gets pretty interesting, because all three states have been pretty razor thin margins in both 2016 and 2020. So, in Wisconsin, right, we have very narrow wins from Biden, 0.6%. In Pennsylvania, 1.2%. North Carolina went to Trump by 1.3%. Um, and, what I will basically say for these states is that I'm going to put North Carolina as a tilt Republican state, Wisconsin as a tilt Republican state. And, for now, I'm going to put Pennsylvania as a tilt Democratic state. These are legitimate toss-up states. I would not, if I was giving myself the option, I would mark them as a toss-up. But given this stage and that either way it's going to be pure speculation at this point, I'm going to give my rating this way. And the reason why I give this rating is because I do think that states, North Carolina in a midterm election where the Democrats are currently in power, I think is going to lean a little bit to the right. It naturally leans to the right. This past election voted about 6 points to the right of the nation. And, it just goes to show it's still a slightly leaning right nation. Democrats can win in the right circumstances. If Republicans nominate someone like Laura Trump, I definitely think this goes to a tilt Democratic state. Because frankly, I think that it'll be able to motivate enough Democrats against her, and not enough, kind of Trump-esque Republicans in favor of her to see her over the top. So a lot of factors involved. Again, Wisconsin, big wild card because it sounds like Ron Johnson is going to be running for re-election again. He kind of flip-flopped on that, and he also has the baggage around the January insurrection and the trying to nullify the general stigma around trying to nullify the results of the Wisconsin and, for that matter, the rest of the presidential election. So I do think that that'll be a bit of a headwind in Wisconsin, but Wisconsin has drifted a lot towards the right in the past, in the past several years, past decade, really. I mean, even in 2018, right, you had a pretty close race between with Scott Walker and the current governor in Wisconsin that, really went to show that the state is now a net, a Republican leaning state, I would say, at least in the Trump era. And we'll have to see if that changes back. But for now, I'm going to put it tilts. And then in Pennsylvania, I think it really comes down to who the Republicans nominate, who the Democrats nominate. It's going to be a close race, I think, either way, especially in a midterm environment that is going to be favoring the most likely Republicans nationally relative to if the Republicans had control of the government. But, I think that the strong showings in the Senate and gubernatorial races in 2018 goes to show that, Democrats still have a lot of strength in Pennsylvania, and while it is now a Republican-leaning state in the Trump era, or a Republican-tilting state, I do think that if the Democrats nominate someone relatively strong, a relative moderate, and the Republicans nominate someone in the mold of Trump, I do think that the advantage will go to the Democrats. So in any case, this is my first video in this series. I'm going, like I said, I'll probably try to keep this on like a monthly basis and then refine it as actual polls start to come out probably in the second half of this year. Because I do think that this is going to change a decent amount. And, I think that our solid and safe states are going to stay that way. But who knows? We never know if this is going to be a 2010-like environment for 2010 or 2014 environment for the Republicans, or a 2018 environment, where it was massively in favor of the Democrats. There's really a lot of variables, and how President Biden performs will really be a determinant of that. So anyways, I'll leave it at that. Thank you guys for watching. As always, please feel free to suggest any video content and I'll be happy to oblige. Have a good one, stay safe, stay healthy, and looking forward to the next video. Bye.